Welcome to Fort Worth 148's podcast, where we meet to discuss Masonic topics and strive to build value in the Brotherhood. The opinions and statements of the participants do not represent any positions or stance of any Grand Lodge or Lodge and are solely the viewpoints of the participants. Welcome back to the podcast, brethren. This is Rhit Moore, past master and current secretary of Fort Worth 148.
This is Billy Hamilton, senior steward for 148.
And this is Gabriel Jagush, master mason with Fort Worth Lodge 148.
Good to be back.
Rhit, tell us about your adventure to Grand Lodge.
It was fun. You sat down with a bunch of well-informed brethren and discussed membership woes.
Membership woes?
Yeah.
I've never heard of such a thing.
I know, it's such a fun discussion, and I didn't really know what to think going into it, how it was going to be, but ended up the day went really fast. It was good discussion. This mediator that came in, so I was told, normally gets paid $10,000 a day. Whether that's true or not, but the other one that they were going to hire was $12,000, and he was going to charge them. But this guy's grandfathers were a Mason, so he did it pro bono, and he knows some Grand Lodge officers. But it was phenomenal. Having a non-Mason in there mediate and coach us how to market things, it was really good. But the thing I like about it most is that we just created a baseline, and now they've put a team together to disseminate it out to the lodges and get their take on it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's going to be great. I foresee it as a real opportunity to get discussion started. So one of the things that he did before he started was he passed out paper clips and had us list all the uses for a paper clip. And, I think I put 4 down.
What is he, MacGyver?
Exactly. So, most people didn't get a lot, it's like me, 3, 4, maybe 2. And then he had us make a list of nouns, and then gave us another 2 minutes to write a use for the paperclip with each of those nouns. And I think I got 12, and other people passed me, but nobody got less than like 7 or 8 uses for a paperclip once they wrote that list of nouns and started thinking about that paperclip outside the box.
And it's kind of cool. So if you have like a practical application in mind, then you can go, oh, okay, this is what. Oh, yeah, that's cool.
And so he kind of tied it all in. He goes, now you guys see masonry in a certain way, and you've got to start looking at it in different ways. We've got to brainstorm and come up with some real solutions, some real ideas to present to your brethren. And you can't think of this in the normal way. So it was a real powerful way to start the meeting. So it's cool.
That is really cool.
Yeah, that guy was top notch. So I see good things, and I see good things happening already. Anyways, it's just perfect timing, because this is going to be a grassroots as opposed to some, small group coming up with a plan and making everybody do it. Lodges, the majority of lodges, they're going to go out and get their take, and that's what's going to be presented.
Mm-hmm. So, that sounds an awful lot like some sort of small government scheme. I don't think I like it.
We'll see.
Yeah. So, speaking of government, in a tangentially related note, we want to issue congratulations to Right Excellent Jack Harper II, the Grand Commander of Knights Templar in Texas. He's going to be the South Central Departmental Commander for the Grand Encampment for 2018 to 2021. So, congrats to Sir Knight Harper on that. That's pretty cool. So, I figure we could jump into questions. And my mom asked me this one. What are all the pictures of boots and crotches I keep seeing on Facebook? And why do they all have the hashtag TXRCP? And I realized that we've never really addressed that, even though a lot of us participate in that. That's for anybody that's not familiar with that, the boots and apron picture, not boots and crotch. That is
I think that's unintentional.
Yeah. Well, that's what my mom saw it as. She was like, "Why are you guys taking pictures of your crotches?" No, we're taking pictures of the aprons and the boots. Well, okay, never mind. And so it's called the Texas Ricky Cox pose, and it's just something that Brother Ricky Cox started as just kind of a goofy thing to do, and a whole bunch of people jumped on it, and it's just exploded. I've seen pictures of people in other states, and even in one case, another country, taking pictures in the TXRCP pose.
Well, I know there's many times where I see those, and it's like, man, I wish I could have made that meeting. And I'll get off my couch and go to a meeting the next night just so I can put up one. It is a great way to share that you're active in lodge. You're being considerate of the lodge and not taking pictures in open lodge or anything like that. It just shows you're active and doing good work.
It's great, and it's just a wonderful, goofy way of expressing yourself.
Yeah. So
right. And
come up with your own.
I love the fact that that Brother Ricky Cox is so involved with it too. I've seen him actually go on and tag other people's pictures with TXRC, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So the second question I saw this was not a question that was asked to us specifically, but it was something that I saw on Facebook and that I was kind of asking about in return. One of our brothers, Colin Clark. I don't know what lodge he's with, but hi, Brother Colin. He asked on Facebook, during the Pledge of Allegiance, I noticed a few brothers who don't put their hand over their heart. They hold their right hand out, knuckles down, slightly to the side. What does that mean? And I asked him, well, what exactly do you mean with this? And he said, he elaborated, and he said, it's kind of like you're stretching your right hand out like you're shaking hands with a really, really short person. And because initially I had thought that it might have been like the Bellamy salute or something like that, which is what the original Pledge of Allegiance was. And it was removed in 1942 because it looked a lot like the Nazi salute. But, with the Bellamy salute, you would stretch your hand forth to the hand towards the flag with your palm down, and then you would lift it upwards, still in the direction of the flag, and rotate your palm so that the palm faced upward instead of downward. And so that's initially what I thought it was, but this is like down low, like a handshake. And so if anybody knows the answer to this, please let us know, because this is one that I don't actually have an answer for. So have either of you guys heard anything like this? Like just like holding your right hand out, knuckles down slightly to the side, like maybe like you're shaking hands with a very short person, like as a salute.
Never have heard of that. I've seen guys do different kinds of salutes, but that's for the Texas, honoring the Texas flag, the pledge. I've never seen anybody do anything to either salute or put their hand over their heart.
Right. Yeah, same here. I haven't seen that in a lodge either, or really outside a lodge.
Yeah.
That's what I was wondering about, because I'd never seen it, and so I'd love to see a photo of it, because I kind of get the feeling of what it looks like based off of the description, but I've never encountered that. So
yeah,
the one thing that it could be is maybe like people imitating a Knights Templar salute with a sword, but without a sword in their hand. But I don't know if that's what it actually is. So
that's a good guess.
Yeah, but still doesn't quite make sense. Either way, it seems to be only be done during the pledge to the Texas flag, or the honor of the Texas flag, or whatever. People don't really do it during the Pledge of Allegiance itself. But it's also not up to code, because with the honor of the Texas flag, like you're supposed to put your hand on your heart as well. So don't really know where that goes. So, but
interesting.
Yeah. So let's jump into the episode content. This week we are talking about the Fibonacci series and the golden ratio. Rhit, want to tell us about what inspired this subject?
sacred geometry. I mean, how can you not look into geometry and not end up at the Fibonacci sequence? Of course, when I had been familiar with it, I guess, all my life through geometry in school, but didn't realize how esoterically inclined it was until I guess that was Dan Brown that wrote that book, right? That was the Da Vinci Code.
Yep, Dan Brown.
Yeah. And that's when of course, I was a Mason at that point, and I was like, you know what? I need to look a little more into this. And so I did. And it's pretty interesting stuff. No doubt about it. You can't really build anything without, well, I mean, you can build stuff, but not as ornate and intricate as they do or did without this Fibonacci sequence.
So for those of you who haven't encountered the Fibonacci sequence before, it's a series of number where each new number is the sum of the two preceding it in the series. So you would start at 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, right? Because 0 plus 1 is 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. 2 plus 1 is 3. 3 plus 2 is 5, and so forth. And so if you wanted a mathematical equation for it, you would just say Fn is equal to Fn minus 1 plus Fn minus 2. So just like the two, take the two preceding it, and that's your new number. It's named after Leonardo, I'm going to mess this up, Bonacci, I guess, of Pisa, also known as Fibonacci, which means son of Bonacci. And it was, he's the guy that introduced it to Western Europe in his book Liber Abaci in 1202 AD. But this concept was already familiar to Indian mathematicians as of about 200 BC. So not exactly a new concept.
Yeah, and you find it in the pyramids all over the world. They find the golden ratio and divine proportion and all that kind of stuff, to where it from my research, I kind of came to the conclusion it was something that was discovered and rediscovered a few times, or kept really secret and passed on, to where you just see big architectural buildings and temples and pyramids pop up that use it, every so 100 years.
Yeah. And so I guess the other term that we're using is the golden ratio. We're also going to call that phi or phi, depending on who you ask, right? But phi is the limit of the ratio of consecutive Fibonacci numbers, right? So you have 2 over 1, 3 over 2, 5 over 3, 8 over 5, that kind of thing. And as you go to infinity, it approaches this number, the golden ratio, phi, which is, 1.618 ... And so if you use something that is, if you have a line that is sectioned according to the golden ratio, it means that the length of the long segment to the length of the short segment, that ratio, long to short, is equal to the ratio of the length of the whole line to the length of the long segment, right? So if you have a line that's divided into section A and section B, A over B is equal to B over A plus B. So this is where, because podcasts are an audio format, you may very well benefit from actually Googling this one, because it's very visual in nature. In fact, this whole episode is visual in nature. It's kind of crazy that we're doing an audio podcast on it, but such is our format.
And just a word of warning, too, if you Google it, then you will quickly get lost in a rabbit hole, because these numbers appear everywhere. And from nature to architecture, as Brother Rhit said, to art, right, and mathematics and science. It's crazy, the occurrence of these numbers and ratios.
Yeah, I mean, they designed the Apple. It's on all Apple products with the golden proportion. So they use it in marketing, art, music, you name it.
I read somewhere that credit cards are actually designed using that same proportion.
Yeah, there was a guy that did some kind of algorithm with it to predict the economy that's still used today. It was like done in 1919 or something. I'm totally throwing that off the cusp, but it's real early on, and they still use it today. So there's a lot of truth in those numbers.
Yeah. And so, I mean, there's so many crazy mathematical properties with this. Like, for example, if you want to know if a number is a Fibonacci number, like some number X, right? It's a Fibonacci number if the equation or the expressions 5x squared plus 4 or the equation 5x squared minus 4 are perfect squares. So if either or both of those are perfect squares, then that's a Fibonacci number that you've got. So I like that. There's this thing called the golden spiral. It's an infinitely repeating logarithmic spiral, and it's got a growth factor of phi, right? So if you wanted to write it as an equation, you would say radius r is equal to phi to the power of 2 theta over pi, right? So basically, you know, where theta is in radians. So as you turn, it increases in proportion or in logarithmic proportion with the golden ratio. And you can actually approximate it with a spiral. Like if you have a golden ratio spiral, you can approximate it with a Fibonacci spiral where you just say, okay, each quarter turn, the radius is going to grow to an ascending number in the Fibonacci sequence. So basically, if you picture a clock and you say, all right, at midnight, it's going to be radius 1, and at 3 o'clock it's going to be radius 2, and at 6 it's going to be radius 3, and then 9 radius 5, and then back at midnight radius 8. Like that'll approximate a golden spiral. So that's kind of cool.
Yep, and a lot of things in nature follow that spiral. It's quite intriguing.
Yeah. Oh man, and we haven't yet gotten to the nature bit, but oh man, it's great. So, one of the things that actually is going to play into our discussion on nature is the golden angle. So, the golden angle is the smaller of two angles that are created when you section a circle in two arcs, with one larger and one smaller, based on the golden ratio. And so, we're going to keep the golden angle in mind because it actually plays into organic growth patterns. And gold rectangles exhibit the golden ratio when you divide their long side by their short side. And so do golden triangles. So whereas the golden rectangle is long side over short side, the golden triangles are isosceles triangles of 72 degrees, and 36 degrees. And the long sides, each of the long sides is going to correspond with a golden ratio multiplier of the short side, right? So if you have the short side is length 1, then each of your long sides is going to be length, 1.618 ... And if you bisect each of the wide base angles, the 72 degrees, you get 36 degree angles, and you form a smaller golden triangle, and that can be done infinitely. So kind of like a fractal. And you can use golden triangles inside of a perfect pentagon. So like your standard pentagon, that you would see in a geometry class, where each side is equal to each other. You can construct a golden triangle on the inside of each one. And if you flip those golden triangles to the outside of the pentagon, you form a perfect 5-pointed star, which is kind of cool.
It's craziness.
Yeah.
So when I was looking at this, I was reading that they're transcendental numbers. I was like, that's like perfect, because it has its mathematical meaning, but it also means, like relating to the spiritual realm, you're getting into the spirit world when you talk about numbers like these.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like, you've got you've got rational numbers, and then you've got irrational numbers, and then you've got transcendental numbers. So like a rational number would be something like 1 or 2, and I think I might be mistaken on this one. Fractions might be included in this as well. So like 5/3 or whatever. And then you've got irrational numbers, which would be something like the square root of 2. And then you've got numbers that can't be expressed as perfect square roots, or not, can't be expressed as simple square roots. So like transcendental numbers like phi or pi. These are numbers that just kind of go, or e, all of these go infinitely. And there's not really a pattern to them, and you can kind of express them mathematically, but it's still going to be difficult.
Yes, they're never ending.
So there's tons of occurrences of the Fibonacci sequence and the golden ratio in nature and in buildings and in art and in writing. It's tons and tons of stuff. But the biggest, coolest way that it shows up is in nature. And the thing kind of to expound on here is that it's an important characteristic of self-organizing systems or spontaneous order in nature. Right. And so this basically means that nature finds a way to make something work, and it just kind of naturally falls into this pattern. And the Fibonacci sequence or the golden ratio both are found in patterns of these spontaneous orders. So like one of the big ways that you see it is on branch stems. So like the way that leaves grow on branch stems, if you look at elm or cherry or pear or like aloe, for example, as the branch grows, the leaves sprout in a spiral pattern that correspond with the Fibonacci series or the golden ratio, because 3 of the rotations of the golden angle, that smaller angle that we just talked about, they add up to a little bit more than a whole circle. So if every time the leaf kind of, as you go up the stem, the position of the leaf sprouting rotates around the stem. And this is to make sure that it gets sunlight. And you look at it, and a lot of these plants, especially plants like elm, cherry, pear, aloe, other plants like that, it actually sprouts in accordance with several rotations of the golden angle. And this way you could have a very, very, very long branch where leaves don't overlap vertically, and that allows each one to get as much sunlight as it can. So that's super cool.
These kind of things are what just like hit home with me, that there is intelligent design. The thing that could happen randomly and be able to be expressed in numbers like we have so perfectly, it just seems, of course, coincidental, but I don't believe in chance. So
no, I mean, I'm with you on this one. It's one of those where the grand architect is very much making his presence known, and this is something that like you look at the Egyptians and the Greeks and the Indians and everything like that, and they believed very much that like God expresses himself in geometry and in natural mathematical patterns.
Yeah,
so,
that's how I love they're called transcendental numbers, because we're dealing with in the spirit realm right here. You can't help but to be in the presence or the awe of God researching these kind of things.
Another way that it shows up in nature is seed patterns, right? So like if you look at pine cones and pineapples, from, let's say if you pluck a pine cone off of a tree and you're looking at it top down, I guess kind of where the base is, right? It's going to have a doubled set of spirals, right? So it'll have several sets of spirals going clockwise and several sets of spirals counterclockwise. When you count the number of clockwise spirals and then the number of counterclockwise spirals, both numbers will be adjacent Fibonacci numbers. So you'll have on young pine cones like 3 and 5 spirals. And then on bigger pine cones, you'll have like 34 and 55 spirals. It's crazy. And this happens with pineapples as well.
Do you think that's what gave, because pine cones represented, well, they represent a lot of things, but knowledge. I know they represented the pineal gland too, but they did represent wisdom in some cultures. And I wonder if that's where that got tied in.
That's the first I've heard of that, but that's really cool. I like that.
Yeah. Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah, daisies and sunflowers both exhibit seed patterns like this. So if you look at a sunflower and you counted seeds, or a daisy and you counted seed, you'll see the seeds radiating out in golden spirals. And this allows the flower to pack more seeds into one flower head, I guess. I don't know what you actually call that. And additionally, when you count the number of spirals, they're not just expanding in golden spirals, but there will be a Fibonacci number of spirals. So it's crazy.
You can see it with the sunflower glaring. My grandfather used to grow those, and I can still remember looking at that spiral when I was a kid, as it spiraled out real small into bigger with all those sunflower seeds.
Yeah. Oh man, dude, my sunflowers are awesome. They're my girlfriend's favorite flower. At some point, I'm just gonna buy her like a whole patch of land that has just sunflowers on it, and then I'm gonna be staring at the sunflowers, counting them while she's admiring how pretty they are. I'm gonna be going, "Ooh, look at this math." But she loves them. But
yeah.
And I guess kind of another item in nature that you'll see this in, like the nautilus shells, right? So like all of the, actually, you know what? I'm not sure. I guess like, guys, what lives in a nautilus shell? I'd like totally blanked on that right now.
Hermit crab.
Hermit crab? Okay.
Yeah.
I was like going, what the hell? What lives in that? Yeah, so like hermit crabs and other, like, I think some like sea slugs live in, or I guess sea snails live in nautilus shells as well. And the size of the shell expands with the golden ratio. So you see that little spiral like that, it's a golden spiral.
It's crazy how that ratio works across the board in nature. It grows leaves so they get sunshine. It grows the shell in accordance with the growth of the body. It's bonkers.
Right. Well, and looking online, you can also see examples to where hurricanes and even spiral galaxies also conform to that logarithmic scale.
It totally fits as above, so below, doesn't it?
Oh yeah.
Yep. And I mean, it's amazing that it goes from small to large, and I mean, and it even goes down the microscopic scale, because one of the things I found is that DNA actually conforms to the golden section.
Oh wow! Like how it twists, or like
the spacing between the two like steps on the ladder.
Oh wow! Okay, that's so cool. So like all the way from DNA to galaxies. That's just bonkers.
Right. Yeah.
That is weird.
Yeah. And then I started getting like super into like the Fibonacci series and the golden ratio and the human body. Like the cochlea in your inner ear. Basically like that is in proportion with a golden spiral. So your cochlea is a golden spiral. The ratio of your whole arm, inclusive of your hand, to the length of your forearm, inclusive of your hand, is the golden ratio. The ratio of your forearm, or the length of your forearm, to the ratio of the length of your hand is the golden ratio. And each bone in your fingers is bigger than the next in a pattern of the golden ratio, right? So, if you include the respective hand bone for each finger, you're going to see, first digit. If we look at first digit, or I guess a first section of your finger, first finger bone, second finger bone, third finger bone, hand bone, that's going to be a almost perfect example of the 2, 3, 5, 8 ratio. They're almost always going to be in that ratio, and that's just super crazy.
No, I mean, that sequence goes all over, from your face, the position of your ears, eyes, teeth, you name it. And it's not the case for every single human being on Earth, because factors happen, but by and large, your body grows with the golden ratio, or is in proportion with it.
Well, there's studies that show that even our perception of beauty is based on how closely subjects conform to that golden ratio as well.
Any art that's done with it, like Da Vinci's art, a lot of his stuff was done with the gold proportions, and it's revered as some of the best ever. All those artists use that golden ratio to paint humans, their hands, you name it.
Yeah, I was reading about Michelangelo actually used golden ratios to determine the positions of subjects within his paintings.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
My favorite, I guess, other than the 2, 3, 5, 8 series in terms of human proportions in your hand, one of my favorite ones is you have one thumb on each hand. In each one thumb, you have 2 bones. In each finger, you have 3 bones. On each hand, you have 5 digits. In total, between your 2 hands, you have 8 fingers, because thumbs aren't fingers. And each wrist has 13 bones in it. So you have 5 carpal bones and you have 8 carpal bones and 5 metacarpal bones. So you see
Get out of town.
Yeah. It's great.
That is so weird. I mean, and it's funny what you can find when you start looking at that. All
great.
lines up.
Oh man, there were a bunch of times where I just had to stop from freaking out when I was reading all about this.
Yeah, there is some. It does get deep, and it's well researched too. So, I mean, from YouTube videos to, however you want to learn it, there's all kinds of colleges that have written papers. So, you can go from the Wikipedia to the elite.
Mm-hmm. Well, and, I guess we've kind of mentioned, how it shows up in buildings, the pyramids and Greek buildings, especially the front view of the Parthenon. And, it shows up in modern buildings too, but that's more of a conscious thing now. My favorite, I think so far my favorite way, and we'll talk about this, my favorite way that it shows up is in the Bible, right? So in Genesis 6:15, we're talking about Noah's Ark, right? And for anybody that's wondering, these are all the NRSV version of them. I'm not going to read King James on the podcast because I don't want to mess it up.
Why doth not want to read King James?
Doth doest thou. No, I prefer NRSV because it's a very good academic translation. Anyway, so Noah's Ark, Genesis 6:15. This is how you are to make it. The length of the ark, 300 cubits. Its width 50 cubits, and its height 30 cubits. So you have the front face of it, the width and height, 50 over 30, 5 over 3, 2 Fibonacci numbers, approximately phi or phi. In Exodus 25:10, they're talking about the Ark of the Covenant. They shall make an ark of acacia wood. It shall be 2.5 cubits long, 1.5 cubits wide, and 1.5 cubits tall. So 2.5 over 1.5, multiply that by 2, 5 over 3. Ooh, good patterns there, right? Moving on to Exodus 27:1, the altar of burnt offering. You shall make the altar of acacia wood, 5 cubits long and 5 cubits wide. The altar shall be square, and it shall be 3 cubits high, 5 over 3. So we see that again. But the coolest example of this that I found, and I was talking about this with Billy yesterday, is in Exodus 26:1. And they're talking about the tabernacle. For anybody that doesn't know what the tabernacle is, when the Hebrews, or I guess the Israelites, or however, Israelites, Hebrews, Jews, whatever, when they left the land of Egypt and they got lost in the desert, they had to erect a tabernacle every night, a giant tent that was basically their temple in the desert, right? And this had several curtains, and they called them, sometimes they called them veils, but this is the pattern. This is the passage partially describing the tabernacle. Moreover, you shall make the tabernacle with 10 curtains of fine twisted linen, and blue, purple, and crimson yarns. You shall make them with cherubim skillfully worked into them. And so we're talking about blue, purple, and crimson. All right. So crimson and scarlet are these super, super bright reds, right? So if we look at them, and especially if we look at them in Masonic tradition, right? we use specifically scarlet, not crimson. The wavelengths of blue, purple, and scarlet or crimson can be found as a golden ratio. If you take purple and red, basically, as the endpoints of the line on the visible light spectrum, and you say, all right, so we've got this line, where do we put the segment divider so that it gives you the golden ratio? You can place blue as the segment divider, and it ends up being this really light sky blue. So if you look at the wavelengths of purple, blue, and scarlet, or purple, blue, and red, or whatever, as purple for 380 nanometers, blue with 479 nanometers, and red with 640 nanometers. That's a golden ratio right there. If purple and red are the endpoints, it breaks up into a golden ratio.
What is the nanometers like? The measuring the color coming off of it?
It is the distance between the, and I'm going to screw this up, I think. It's the distance between the peaks of each light wave.
Oh, that creates the color. Gotcha.
Right.
Now that's crazy.
So yeah, so if purple to red is the whole section of the line, then purple to blue is the long section, and blue to red is the short section of the golden ratio line.
So is that something you could figure out, how many nanometers is in between the wavelengths in ancient times?
No, but I don't know that you could do that, but it's an interesting pattern, and it's just kind of like neat to think about. And so for any Royal Archmasons out there, think about the tabernacle. Think about that purple, blue, and in our parlance, scarlet, right?
Yeah. So
that's something that you see in the Royal Arch degree is different colors of veils in the tabernacle. And 3 of the 4 veils are those colors. And so just kind of thinking about that, it's just kind of cool how it shows up in the Bible.
No, that is cool. That really made me wonder. I don't guess that they have the dimensions for the tabernacle, though, do they?
I believe they do.
And we need to dig that up, because that'd just be interesting Masonically, because we refer to that in our degrees, and I'm sure it'd have to be it's not like they built it different every night.
Let's see. Dimension of tabernacle. I did not actually look that part up. Let's see. Most holy place. This one is in feet, not in cubits. So this one says external courtyard of 150 feet by 75 feet with a high fence about 7 feet in height. The tabernacle itself was 45 by 15 feet. I don't know that. Let's see if we can find it in cubits. Aha. So the tabernacle was 10 cubits wide. Its total length was 30 cubits. The most holy place where they kept the Ark of the Covenant was 10 cubits long and 10 cubits wide. And then the middle chamber for the tabernacle is 20 cubits long. So, yeah, that's kind of cool. And so they've got, and the outer court is 100 cubits long, and the width of the court is 50 cubits wide. And so I guess that might work, but I'd actually have to sit down and doodle on it for a little while. So
yeah. No, that'd be interesting. I would love to research the exact dimensions of that tabernacle. See how we size up to that. Not sure.
Probably not well.
No, I don't think so either.
Yeah, there's lots of lodges take a lot of liberties with their dimensions.
And
you do what you have to.
Yeah, you do, but maybe they're in proportion. To where it was 40 feet long or something like that, that it's half the length. Who knows? We'd have to look that up, check it out.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. But yeah, so there's a lot of really neat ideas that you can pull from that. you see this in music, you see this in poetry. I'm trying to think, like somebody was saying that the Iliad is kind of divided into this meter wise, but I wasn't able to I didn't have time to look into that.
No.
I know that Mozart he sectioned the lengths of his symphonies by the golden ratio, that kind of thing.
Who wrote the Magic Flute?
That would be Mozart.
Yeah,
Mozart. Yeah, not Mozart. Mozart.
He totally wrote that. That was all Fibonacci sequence. And we actually had a past grandmaster who wrote a ballad with his acoustic guitar that was based on the Fibonacci sequence.
Wait, really? That's awesome.
Yes. Yeah, he's super cool. That was Donnie Broughton.
Broughton. Okay.
Yeah. He was 2007.
That's awesome.
Super interesting guy. Get him chatting.
Yeah, the Greeks had some pretty cool ideas about this, like this whole idea of sacred geometry showing up and the golden ratio coming out. Like their take on it was that there's a right pattern or a ratio and many wrong ones, but there's only one right one because it's the one. The right patterns are the ones that show up in nature naturally. And it's kind of the idea there is like it's a tool to teach us about morals, right? So like there's no moral relativity, like there's only one order of nature, and so we should think about that in terms of our spiritual natures as well. Like there's only one moral nature, there's not multiple ones. So I thought that was kind of cool. I don't know if I necessarily agree with it, but yeah, it's a cool way to illustrate the concept of no moral relativity.
Yeah.
But that would be interesting. That's almost similar to saying there's only one right path and many wrong ones, which is kind of a cool moralistic story too.
Yeah. I mean, to where that might be a little more subjective, but in nature, you can try to grow the fern that's not in proportion, with Fibonacci, and it's not going to grow as good as the one that does. So, who's to say what's right or wrong? It's really what's most effective, and how to best work and agree on this.
Oh, how about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and like we said earlier, like the way that I look at it is it's God making his design known in nature. But there's a super cool way, and now I'm going to very briefly touch on this because this is a audio format podcast, not a visual one. But you can construct the ratio of phi from the Vesica Pisces, right? And so the Vesica Pisces is two circles of the same radius that each one of their centers is located on the other circle, right? So if I draw a circle, I'm going to punch my compass into some point on that circle and draw a circle using that compass of the exact same radius. And they're going to overlap and they're going to create maybe like a little bit of an eye shape, maybe, so like looks kind of like a human eye almost. Or the first half of the ichthys fish. All right, so Christians will kind of recognize that symbol.
Mm-hmm.
But the Vesica Pisces, if you bisect it vertically and horizontally, and you draw a triangle, right angle triangle that uses the length of the Vesica Pisces and as the base, and then you construct like a right angle triangle on it, you can actually eventually use multiple lengths that show up from all those intersections and come up with a line segment that results in the golden ratio. And now, of course, that sounded like total gibberish because this is an audio podcast and you need the visual. So go look at www.freemasons-freemasonry.com/divine_proportion.html. And you'll see like somebody making a Vesica Pisces and then constructing the golden ratio out of it, which is just absolutely crazy.
No, it is nuts.
And especially when you look at the Vesica Pisces as like a symbol for God and, the process of the days of creation, then the fact that can you can derive the golden ratio out of that is super cool.
Well, and I've also read about how you can derive an equilateral triangle out of using the Vesica Pisces also, where you draw a line between the points from the two circles and then draw two lines from those points to the top where the two circles intersect, say point C, and you get a perfect equilateral triangle from that as well.
Yes. And that's super cool.
No, the golden proportions always reminded me of the part of the explanation of geometry out of our monitor, where it talks about past brethren or anybody when they survey nature, and see her proportions, that it's basically what inspired us to start imitating that and gave rise to societies and was built upon and improved upon year after year. And it was hard for those guys to sit down and look at something like a nautilus shell or a sunflower and not start to contemplate how something was built so magnificently and how they can duplicate it. It is very deep stuff. I know one of my favorite things about the golden ratio is the squaring of the circle. Did y'all read any about that?
I didn't get around to that. Can you tell us about it?
It was so interesting because it's been around forever, where they try to make a square the same volume as a circle with square or a straight edge and compasses in so many finite moves, which is ultimately impossible because you have to use the golden ratio and it's a transcendental number. But they can get really close now with modern technology. But it's something that's gone on forever of them trying to do, and they were able to get as close as possible to that Fibonacci sequence. And for the Mason, we look at it as symbols, it's symbolism, and the circle, and some cultures, and for us, it could represent deity, where the square or the cube represents man. And our journey should be speculatively squaring the circle. We're trying to bring ourselves to the same, not the same volume, but the same godlike qualities. You get closer and closer. That Fibonacci sequence.
That's cool.
Yeah. It's good stuff, man. That is a rabbit hole that goes deep, and it's fun to research. So if you get bored with history or anything else like that, that's a good one to run down the rabbit hole with.
I do have one more thing on the Vesica Pisces, and it's something that was definitely known to operative Masons because you can actually see it used in cathedrals. Like Chartres, I don't know if I'm actually pronouncing that correctly, but Chartres Cathedral in France, you can actually see it used over the central tympanum in the western facade.
That's great. And that's the thing, is that I know we scratched the surface on the architecture, how nature replicates it, how we as humans do in our bodies. It's an endless rabbit hole. When they figured it out, they started putting architecture all over.
One of those things that it's amazing to see how long ago it started popping up, and it's amazing to see how prevalent it still is today. Although I can kind of see how it makes a lot more sense nowadays that it shows up, because we know about it and we know, this is why we like the way that thing looks. Whereas a lot of times, maybe in ancient times, they kind of had an idea about it, or maybe sometimes they had a really good idea about it. But a lot of times it seems like it happened by accident too.
Very well could have. It is hard to tell. Why some cultures, it's obvious, that they very knowledgeable about it. Some, it's like they could have just gotten lucky.
All right. So in this week's quote, we have, "The Greeks conceived the creator of the universe in terms of absolute truth, not in terms of handed down dogma, received wisdom, or religious belief. They deduced that form and number were essential to the universe, and that creation proceeded from abstract forms, things that could be intellectually appreciated but not grasped or perceived by the five senses. to physical reality. The subtleties of number and absoluteness of geometry were part of the noumenal world, the hidden structure behind physical matter. Geometry and numbers are sacred because they codify the hidden order behind creation. They are the instruments used to create the physical universe. Simplicity in number, fraction, and ratio provide the harmony and intellectual rigor of both the universe and the geometry of Euclid and his fellow Greek geometers. That was by Dr. Stephen Skinner, who wrote, and this is in his book, Sacred Geometry, Deciphering the Code.
That sounds like a good book.
Yeah. It'd be kind of cool to get him to come to the lodge and talk sometime.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. So, gentlemen, closing thoughts? How about you, Billy?
I think all of this is, super fascinating, right? When you actually get into it, there's a reason why we refer to the great geometrician of the universe or the great architect. And, I think this just kind of reinforces that there is a lot of commonality, something behind our teachings, right? And for me, I think it kind of reinforces every time I look into it, that wonder I felt when I first started looking into the craft.
It's a good point.
Yeah. Right. How about you?
My thing is that
This, to me, clearly points to the fact that we need to be in search of light all the time. It may be something as deep and complex as Fibonacci. It may be something, much more simplistic, working on a carburetor. I don't know. Whatever it may be, always be learning. Pick up stuff because you don't know how it's going to inspire you, what it's going to, bring to the table maybe later later in life. So keep on searching for light.
Yeah. And, fellas, friends and brothers, this is, to me, in my opinion, it's a very real sign of God's presence in the universe and in nature and in us. When you look at plants that follow the Fibonacci ratio or the golden ratio, that's him in nature. When you look at buildings or music or things like that follow the golden ratio, that's him in us. And if you look at the finger bones, that's him in us too. But to me, the Fibonacci sequence and the golden ratio are reminders of his constant presence. So it's a very reassuring sort of sensation. So yeah, keep looking for that, because you're going to find patterns and you're going to find lots of cool things that are very tangible reminders of God's presence in the world. So yeah. But, we are Fort Worth Lodge 148. If you want to find us, you can contact us at www.fortworth148.org, at Fort Worth Lodge 148 on Facebook. Our email is info148@fortworth148.org. If you live in the 64th District of the Grand Lodge of Texas and you want to promote an event, please reach out to them at 64th.org. That's 64th.org.
Well, I guess it's time to close it down again for another week, huh?
I guess.
Well, I know this was a little shorter than they deserve a break. A little shorter podcast this week.
Yes.
We'll see.
Our listeners deserve a break too.
Exactly. So, all right, brothers, until next week, this is Rhit Moore signing off.
This is Billy Hamilton signing off.
And this is Gabriel Jagush signing off.